Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 31 of my Industrial Revolution 3 playthrough. In this episode, we are going to make the build that washes copper and test it out and see how it works. Enjoy. Okay, we have essentially three different sections that we need to build. One of them on the left can be the furnace stack. The one on the right will be the washers. And then the one in the middle can be the crushers. And the washers, being the smallest item, will probably define the shape and size of this, because we could just make these other setups bigger and wider if we need to. Oh, it's so nice to have those be delivered by a robot. And the modules will get here when they get here. And one cool thing about how these washing plants work is that the same washing plant could handle hot water and cold water, because if we go through here and look at all these recipes, just clear all those out, the hot water recipe needs 60 degrees or above, and the cold water is 60 degrees or below, and the boiler makes 90. So what it means is if you want to do the hot water recipe, you just turn boilers on and it will heat the water up to 90. It won't necessarily get to 90 because this is Factorio and it'll never get to a perfect 90, but it'll try to get it there. And certainly over time, as the washers use water, the average temperature will increase. And then at some point you might say, well, we don't need the hot water recipe anymore. Let's just do the cold one. Well, when that happens, you turn the water heater off, and then the average water temperature will decrease until it goes below 60 degrees. And then because IR3 automatically sets recipes whenever possible, it will switch to the cold one. So we can use the same washing plant to cycle between hot water washing and cold water washing. So we only need these 24. And everything else about the recipe is the same. The only thing that changes here is the temperature of the water that goes in and how much nickel or rare resource comes out. So that's why we're doing these separately instead of having it be direct insertion, which otherwise looks like it would make a lot of sense here. We're keeping them separate for various logical reasons, but the water pipes do hook up, so we could just hook them in a straight line like this, and it would be fine. It's just, would the power poles reach? Well, that would certainly work. So if we did something like this, where the input belt was one red belt coming down, and then it was two going up the other way, and then we had another one on this side, would that work? Well, it depends on how fast each individual machine is. It's kind of hard to tell because it needs to set the recipe first. This is the one disadvantage of how IR3 does things, is if you want to calculate how many items per second, you can't use rate calculator because there's no recipe. But we do have an idea that it's slightly more than 1 per second of input, and it's around 2 of output, and it's 2 different items. So 1 of input is certainly doable with a long-handed inserter, and we should be fine with this one output inserter as well. And there's even a gap in the middle for power poles. Fortunately, we'll need to have one on each side, and we won't be able to put lights in here, but that does mean we'll be able to mash them super close together like this, and mashing them super close together is probably better than having lights. So first, let's do 6 on each side and see what that looks like. It would be like this. Ah, robots are so good. And that is certainly not very long, because we know we're going to have a giant furnace stack of gas furnaces, so clearly we would want this to be twice as long rather than be twice as wide. Looks like we still would have room for lights, because it would be kind of offset like this. So I believe if we did another one of these, that should give us our 24. Man, those robots are great. It's amazing how much better they get just with a couple of upgrades. So the crushed ore would come in, it would stop there, and we need one more set of power poles there. Let's worry about the water in a little bit and just concentrate on the belts, because that's the easy part. Oh, we're almost done with modules already. But once we start placing these machines, we're going to need more. And actually, they're not getting placed because we do actually need to keep the zone going. There's the lights. That's probably slightly too many of them. But oh well. These might just be included as a part of the design, just to keep the robot zone extended. Well, this would create an output that would go this way, and it would be 2 belts worth. Plus, it would also need the input. And actually, we might as well keep everything lined up. So we need to crush ore. However, it's going to go to 2 different places. potentially it'll go to the furnaces as a backup, because whenever you are doing more advanced processes, this especially applies to Angel Bobs, but also here, at least in IR3, now that we're at these washers, whenever you have a more complicated recipe, you always want to have a backup recipe. Let's just call it the Old Faithful recipe. You need to have something that will always work in case everything crashes, because one thing that happens with these recipes is that the further down the chain you go, the more points of failure you'll have. And the points of failure for, let's say, copper and anything else, it's basically going to be it ran out of space for the extra nickel or other rare resource. So what happens if we have too much and there's just no room? We still need to be able to make copper the old-fashioned way, or the Old Faithful way that has no other requirements, and that would be just the standard crushing recipe. So this setup needs to do both. But now we have an idea of how big of a setup we're going to need, and we kind of want to try to line it up. So if we go down to the end, that should be 12, and it will have an input belt from somewhere. Depends on where all these go. It's probably going to be really far out of the way, like out here or something. So the belt will either come up or down. For now, let's assume it comes from below, and we're processing one red belt, which means the yellow belt will be enough. And when it crushes, it will also turn into a yellow belt, but for throughput reasons, let's make it a red one, because you can run into belt compression problems otherwise. So it would basically be this, except all the way down. And these power poles will reach if we alternate them. In fact, we can alternate them more or less every 2, but it looks like that one won't quite reach. Will it reach this one? No. It does have to be back and forth. And we're definitely going to need modules for all of these. So there we go. We would have our one output belt, and if we select everything, it is 24. And then that's only half, which means we need a whole nother one. Oh, cool. Research is done, and we don't really need any of this other stuff right now. I mean, I guess we could start researching it, but I'd rather not research things we are not ready to use, because we basically can't use any of that. The robots are rushing to help. One other thing that would be nice is having them deliver at least our batteries, because we are using a ton of power now with this exoskeleton, and it's kind of awkward to run down here to grab them. So we can get rid of the request on here, which is the first of many things we'll be able to remove from this, and say we want 100 of them. And there we go. We will have to be within the logistics zone for this to happen, but it's not like we need batteries super fast, so we can deal with not having them for a while we wait for robots to find us wherever we so happen to be. Also, it is annoying, but you definitely want to set these logistics filters for all of these, so let's say a robot picks up one too many items and it needs to bring them back, or they're in your inventory and it needs to find somewhere. These filters need to be set so it actually places them back where they are most relevant. So this is all still being built, but the concept is the same, where we're going to have our input belts, and then we have our 2 output belts that essentially are just one belt, because they're going to combine. And then which direction they go, probably need to clear all these out too, because they're in the wrong way. And the direction they get sent depends on the status of the controlling chest, and we'll get to that in a bit. One potential direction will be to the left, and one is to the right. We should have logic, and either one or the other will work at any time, so we don't need to actually have any priority. Where one direction goes this way to get sent in, and the other way gets sent to the furnaces. So the washing will be controlled by the temperature of the water. However, we would only want to wash the ore if we weren't overloaded on nickel. If we are overloaded on nickel, then the way we would want to operate would be just this one. Now this won't be the best of splitters, but it also kind of doesn't matter. It's not perfect, but it does work. There's going to be logic on these 4 spots. Oh wow, they're done with all the modules already? Well, okay then. There's more factory. And one more of our drills is out. We're down to 34% tin. It's actually kind of amazing how much tin we are using on these circuits. It's quite substantial. Well, luckily we have lots and lots of ore available. It's just a question of building a train to go get it, which certainly isn't difficult. Alright, we've got more machines. So let's go with that for now. I'm actually kind of surprised how quickly this is all going. But now we probably want to put another one of these basically right in there, because now we need to do a huge furnace stack. Going to need 144 of them, and let's just do them in the same size as everything else here, where it would be one belt in and one belt out, and we don't care about what input resource it is because it'll work all the same. That's so fast. There would be something like this. And everything lines up. We're starting on the left. We technically don't need to cover these furnaces, but I kind of still want to anyway. And it'll be consistent power poles with the other side. So let's do it. Let's see, what are those robots waiting on? They don't have anywhere to place their resources. Well, one thing you definitely do need when you have robots is a junk chest. And that's just somewhere for them to put stuff that otherwise they don't know where to put it. And just keep checking on it later to see what kind of junk they have. And because of the spacing of these, probably want to do like 2 of these at a time. Man, we're producing so many items now that we can make some pretty big builds without much effort. So we have all of that, but technically there's a whole nother one that we need to fit in here. And I kind of want to build the entire thing. We'll just keep this going, because they'll just split off and go into where they need to. I wanted to set the logic with all of these, but since we can't place it all, we won't worry too much about that. First, we need to control the water input, and for that we need 4 electric boilers. That does require those copper rods, which are all the way down here. And really, they placed all those modules already? Well, I guess it's time for the last bit, which is essentially all of our oil processing. So we'll replace all of these. And definitely we don't have the electric mixers in here. So productivities if they are available. Efficiencies if not. And of course the oil refinery. And that's another one that only gets 2 modules for now because we don't have a use for the extra one. Okay, I think that's most of it. 600 modules need to be placed, so we shall find out. It's going to take a little while. So we need to have the boiler logic, where either the water from the boilers comes in, or the non-heated water. And we're going to need 4 of them, so 2 for each row. And we essentially need 3 pumps to do this. I guess we could put an underground pipe in there just to help a little bit. Maybe put a power pole in the middle. That there will be a water input from somewhere, and it will go to these 3 pumps, and they will be controlled by their own logic. Something like that, where you have 2 pumps for the heated water, and they pump water in to get used, or if you want cold water, you would just turn on this pump instead. So we will have to come up with the logic for that. So I think we're basically at the point of being able to build this. Of course, it would be nice to have robots help us, but the factory bots are also going to help. So it's going to be of limited effect here. Select all of that. Don't need any of this. We'll just call this the number 2. Put it in our blueprints so it doesn't take up a slot in our inventory. And it's basically this. Man, that's fast. They're still helping and dumping resources into this chest, but also when we build stuff, they will take them out of that chest and help out, so it should all work out. And where to build it? Yeah, probably top left up here. We do have our forestries here, and we probably don't want to tear them down. However, we could always start building on the end and see how it works. So that forestry ends right there. So that should clear it out. It looks like it. Man, that's a lot of trees. And our setup is not small compared to all of this. And it doesn't have to be mashed in super close, but we definitely need all these trees gone. And in it goes. All right, let's finish what we came out here to do. And that's extend the furnace stack. Because we actually need 2 more of these. Wondering if we should just extend these down a little bit. It'll be less square, but because of the amount that we need, it'll just take up less space. So the repeating pattern seems to be there. We need 72 of them, which does go down to there. Kind of want to try to request some roboports, or robo towers anyway, in our inventory because we use them a lot. So we'll take that, put it over there too. Definitely seems like we need more robots because when they have to come all the way out here, it's a little slow. Construction robots seem fine. It's the logistics robots that are struggling. Of course, if we start using robots to place concrete down, we'll use a lot, but for now, how about we increase logistics to, let's go with 500. But do we have enough? We do. So now we can figure out the logic for it. Well, first the input, whatever it so happens to be, would just get split evenly to each one. And then the outputs are probably going down because we need to have a control chest of some sort for all of these. Of course, the pipes will need to connect too. And we can get away with short pipes here, so we'll use them. That way we know where the pipes go, and let's just send them to the right because that's where everything is. And we're going to have an incredible amount of resources here. We might as well pre-stack them to make it so this can all be on one belt. So the way that we'll do that is output priority on the left is what we want, which is copper. And then loaders going into stackers, and the loaders then leaving. And although this could all fit on a yellow belt, let's just do red so there's no issues. And that should get everything stacked. Plop this in there. And again. And again. The rest of those will go through, which will create our 2 belts. Not completely full, but 2 belts of resources. And this might as well be the control point of the resources going in. Let's push this over here so we can more easily see. But one of these will be filled up with the stacked ingots. It's not really an item on this list, but it is there. I might want to grab some ingots just to show how it would work. I'll grab a bunch of ingots. And just as an example, we'll throw them in here so they get tossed out. To show that they do get sorted, it sets the recipe, and then the stacked version of the ingots go in here. However, keep in mind, it doesn't actually stack any denser when they're in the stacked ingot form compared to not, because the stack size is just 1/4 of the size, so it doesn't make it any denser. But you do have to keep in mind when dealing with signals that they are in stacked form. It gets to 25, and then it starts a new one, so it's 100 ingots in stacked form, so just keep that in mind. And that signal is now there. And the signal is 0 for the other resources, but how this essentially would work is we would control these pumps for the water based on how much of the rare resource we would need. So we definitely need to connect this. And can these reach? Doesn't look like it. I kind of want them to. So we'll keep it going. And we'll pipe it in there. And actually, let's do a constant combinator simply as a signal generator. And how would this work? So long as we are not completely out of ingots for our nickel, we essentially can keep running it in the low output mode. And the reason why we want to do that using the cold water is because if we are not using very many of those nickel ingots, they will build up. So we really don't want to run it in the high nickel mode using the hot water, because that will make it 5 times as fast, and we might not be able to even consume it in the slow mode. So really, we would only want to use the hot water in very serious conditions. And what would those conditions be? Well, a stack of resources is approximately 100 ingots, so how about if the number gets below 100 ingots, the hot water turns on. So let's create a sample output here. And there's nickel ingot. And we can say we have, I don't know, 15 of them. So now that signal is being sent. And I'm actually thinking we should use a combinator for this just to make future builds easier. So we'll hop this across. Basically, this is going to be the hot water turn on point, and that is nickel is less than 25 stacks, which is 100 ingots. If so, we'll do a green circle for the output, and it is green. So the two relevant pumps are these ones. So if the green signal is greater than 0, they should turn on, and they all are. Meanwhile, the other pumps are not. Their condition is that green must be equal to 0. And if that's the case, they turn on. And you might think that this won't work because we're mixing water temperatures where this is going to click on, making some amount of hot water, and then ingots are going to pop in here and it's going to turn off making the hot water. But ultimately, it's just an average. So some of these might have hot water, some of them might have cold, some of it might be stuck in the pipes. But ultimately, it's just a running average, and surprisingly, this does work. You can mix the temperatures of the water together. The one thing I'm not sure about is the ingots. So if this goes above 25 ingots for a split second, the hot water is going to turn on. But then when an ingot gets used, the hot water is going to turn off. But even then, that's fine. That if it's hovering right around the set point of 100 ingots or 25 stacks, then it's fine if these are clicking on and off repeatedly, because it's at the set point. That our set point is based on this combinator, and it's aiming to have no less than 25 ingots. So if that's the average result, then it's fine. It doesn't matter if it's clicking on and off, and that will control the water. And might as well connect these all together. So let's create a new test signal. Let's say hot water kept running, and now we're at 30 ingots. And we turn this on. You can kind of see the light flicker there. But see how this pump in the middle is on and these two are off? When we click it, they alternate. So it's either hot water out of these two furnaces or cold water just straight down the middle that bypasses them. And that's how that would work. So this will control the status of the nickel or the rarer resource. But we also need to control the status of the common resource, in this case copper. Because it's great that we can control the nickel, but what happens if this chest completely fills up with nickel? Then what? It's kind of the goal that the secondary chest here for nickel will not be completely filled up because it's aiming for the set point of 25. Although it is possible that it will eventually fill up if we just don't use those resources, and that's a side effect of how it works. However, we can control the copper in the same way, where we look at the status of copper and then turn on or off the different methods, and we would do it with these. And in fact, we don't even need this one right here, and we would do an output priority to the left. So ultimately what we would be doing is controlling the resources that are going into the furnaces. So we'll keep the wire going up, and it doesn't quite reach, but it might not matter because we need to set another combinator. And it works very similarly to this one, where wire goes in and we are controlling which one runs. And the ideal condition is that we are not running critically low on copper ingots. And because we need a bit of a buffer here, how about let's say 250. As long as we have 250 or 10 stacks worth of copper ingots, then all is well. And it sends the green signal, which will allow the mixed ore to go through and be processed. But if it ever gets below that point, then we need to stop using this ore and just straight up use the crushed ore. So we'll say green signal exists, so greater than 0. If so, these ones will run. And if the green signal is equal to 0, this one will run. And since we are below the set point of 250, it assumes there is a problem and it is not using any of these. And we can test this by coming down here and setting this much higher. Let's say 500. So we come back up here, and now it has switched. It's turned this one off, and these ones are turned on. So all of that together should work. And there's some other things we might want to do here. Would be nice to have some numbers. The most this can fill up to is 1,000. Let's use some 4-digit displays since we haven't used those yet. Where this one is for copper, and this one will be for the nickel. And it is showing a number there because we have a false test signal. And that'll just tell us how that's going. We will need to actually get water in here, but that's not too big a deal. Another thing that's related is that we have to actually clean this polluted water now. And it's the same number of water cleaners. So in fact, to be consistent, we can just kind of pump them in the other side. So that'll take in all the polluted water and fill it into this pipe. We are going to have a belt of a tiny amount of extra resources. For now, how about we just throw them in a chest so they disappear? We'll deal with it later. And some long-handed inserters, which of course means this is misaligned. And that'll get rid of the polluted water. However, we do need to leave room for regular water in here. And I don't know if I want to smash this right in there. So how about it goes down here. And we need a valve here. And we want to say only top up. So it's going to fill it up to 80% and then stop, which will allow the polluted water to take up the rest of the space. We're probably going to have like a water pipe coming through here, going that direction. So let's just leave it here. Go right here. I don't think this is going to be too much water. I think it's about 50 water per setup, so it's not a whole bunch. But we hook that up. This is probably going to be balanced enough to where we don't need to have any Nixie tubes. But that's going to fill up all the way. And this one filled up to 80%. So it's important to note that when we hook this up, it's going to start making our water. Let's get rid of our test signal then. That because we are at 0, it is telling the electric boilers to operate. So when we hook it up, water goes in. We can't really see the boilers. They are there and they have lights on them like everything does. And it is filling up all of these machines with 90-degree water. And it succeeded. So everything is heated up and now the boilers have shut off. And it looks like most of the modules in the factory have been placed. Let's check to see. There shouldn't be any machines for these tier 1 modules. Well, I guess there are, but those are the miners that are out there. Oh yeah, the barreling machines. Why are there 2 of them here? I don't know. Well, we can use both of these tools to get this done quickly. So there we go. Guess we should search for the productivity modules, and there are none. Well, because we are still overloaded on sulfur, and we are running low on our natural gas here, we do kind of need to dump it. So let's have a dump chest here, and it'll have 2 conditions to operate. So we'll say if the explosives pack is less than, say, 10, it turns on. And the other condition right here is the sulfur overload condition. And that essentially would be sour gas being too high, which would be 80%. So sour gas is above 20,000. It also turns on, but that's facing the wrong way. There we go. So this will be an enormous buffer of sulfur, because this will actually only ever turn on if sour gas is below 20. So actually, we're going to need to have an OR condition here, where the condition is sour gas is above 20,000. Get an on signal. Or the other one is that the explosives packs are low. And the input for that one can just be the green wire so it doesn't get mixed up. Let's just put them all on the same pole here. That does sort of put the explosives pack on that wire though, which I don't really want it to be. There we go. It should be separated now. So the packs are going in here. It has its signal. And we have a sufficient amount of packs, so it's not sending the green. But because we have tons of sour gas, this is sending its on signal. And the condition is green has to be greater than 0. If so, packs go in. And this is going to save up a lot of packs and probably max us out again. And since this is something that is kind of important. Let's create some Nixie tubes for it. It'll be the explosives packs, and they stack in units of 100, which means divide by 40. Just so at a glance we can see how full it is. Alright, well, let's cut off some belts. And we need to get resources up here. So basically we need this all over again. And none of those trees. So that'll now be a red belt. And we're almost ready here. Let's make sure this is set correctly. And it is. We probably should just let it run in this mode to make sure that it works. So right now, it is critically low on copper ingots, so it's going to completely bypass the washing for now. So we probably should let it run as it wants to, because as the copper fills up, it will switch over to hot water, and then as the nickel fills up, it'll switch over to cold water. So if we have set all this correctly, it should be automatic. Fingers crossed. So first, lots of noise. Just crushing copper with lots and lots of machines. It makes it up, but because our copper ingot capacity is low, it's sending it to the giant furnace stack, and they'll just grab whatever ore they can get hold of. They don't care, and that's fine. And it looks like it is starting to send some ore to the side here because of just how the belts work. And that's fine, because it's just going to get clogged right here. And actually, let's make sure near side and far side was not required. It looks like it actually kind of was, so that's going to be a slight issue that we'll have to address. But the ingots are making it in here, and the copper is not holding up because I guess we're using it in other places. But this definitely needs to have near side and far side. And that switch would have to happen pretty much right here. For now, we'll just let this run, because we're right at the point of the logic where we got to 250, and now the gate's open. Now, they're not going to pick up these ores right now because they're currently working on something else, but the second they can pick it up, they will. And I guess we made a nickel ingot because it cares. And actually, I kind of want to come down here and set the priority to the left so we can see what it would be like at full power. Of course, that means the rest of the factory is just going to not get anything, but oh well. This is where it's going to be coming from now on. So that's quickly filling up, as we would expect. Looks like near side and far side isn't going to be an issue when the production rate is this slow, but we are cleaning the water away. It very much seems to be working. We're storing a little bit of junk, and we are slowly starting to collect the nickel ingots. Kind of want to stop this for a second. It's not like the ore is going anywhere. And well, it doesn't really matter because copper is going to be filled up. And it looks like we filled up on nickel, so now these are going to switch over to the cold water processing. And you can kind of see that because now it's making very little nickel. And of course, everything else that's in the system is still going to come through and probably clog up. And that's fine. Oh, it looks like all these are basically facing the wrong way. I was wondering why things were surprisingly slow. Well, that's why we built one of these, to get rid of all the bugs. Okay. I think I've gotten it. Almost need to check this just to make sure that it's pretty useful for this, though. That goes on the correct side of the belt. That goes on the correct side of the belt. That one goes straight through. I think I got it to fit in here without doing anything too crazy. Let's see if it works. Now it should be running in cold water mode, and some of these will still use hot water because the water temperature is above 90, so it's going to use it all up first. However, if you look at the temperature of the water here, it is absolutely dropping quite quickly. And now these ones have switched to cold water. And slowly, the ones at the top, you can see that the temperature of the water is decreasing. And now that it has, they've all switched to cold water mode. And it seems to be going at full blast. And this will basically just keep running until it completely maxes out. There we go. We have our maximum amount of copper ingots ready to go. And we haven't maxed out on nickel. And all of this is just going to keep running until it's maxed out. Okay. Well, let's send copper to where it needs to go. Well, part of this involves completely deleting our current setups. But we don't want to get rid of any of the wires or anything. And all the ingots are going to come in stacked now. So that's something to keep in mind. Looks like we actually caught up on ammo magazines, which is nice. Alright, we should be able to hook this up. Let the ingots fly. But we have lots of resources that are just waiting to get used. But you can see first that it is clearing through all of the ingots that we have. And then going through this 10% nickel ore. And it'll stay like that, because we have a sufficient amount of nickel on hand. Then you can see now that it's gone through the bulk of the nickel that we are producing very little of it. And hopefully it stays that way, because we don't want to get overloaded. And it looks like the copper has just about made it to the end. So let's run down there and see if this whole thing works. We'll probably want to have a circuit HUD for all of those items. But for now, we've got all this junk and we can just pick it all up. And now, the stuff that has somewhere to go is going to be picked up by robots. And there they go. Let's try out some of these stackers. First, let's fill in the main bus. And it didn't need much, but it's fine. Let's fill in the bronze, which we needed none. However, we did need it for our red circuits. And all that's going to start up. Finally, the green circuits. Well, it's certainly going. So that's all looking good. And back at the source, it is very lazily moving forward. It doesn't look like much, but it is 60 items a second, at least at maximum output. And yeah, you see that it operates in bursts, but that's fine. You can see that the water temperature is 15 degrees here. So it never received any extra temperature. It's working correctly. And another circuit HUD. We'll need to expand this upwards and say ore processing. And that list is also probably going to get pretty big. So it seems fine. It's starting to smooth out here. We got rid of most of those extra resources, and it seems pretty good. I would love to use our new ore here, but because this thing took so long to build, we probably should get the next copy going so the robots have some work to do. But that's gonna have to wait till the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.